Hello, everyone. Imagine you're the owner of a guest house and you've been sitting there all day bored, and then along comes a knock on your door, and you open the door, and there's a very happy looking person outside, and that's your first guest, and you are very glad about that. You let them in, you invite them to take a seat in your lounge while you are signing them into their room upstairs. You make sure you're going to give them a best room and upgrade because they look like a wonderful guest. So while you are signing them in, they're talking to you nonstop, and your mood is turning to a bit happy. But then by the time they stop talking, you're feeling a little bit drained because you've been sitting there all day bored, and then all of a sudden there's this burst of energy. The door has another knock, and you open it, and outside is someone you wouldn't expect to be here this time of year. They look like they're someone that would be better placed there on Halloween night. They look a bit gothic. They're all dressed in black hair, etc. So suddenly you realize that this person is not someone you want there, so you try to make an excuse, but then something in the back of your mind stops you from turning them away and helps you to realize that they are probably also a person of value, and you will need to have a further conversation to find out the value of who they are. So you let the person in and you realize that their name is fear. So fear and excitement are sitting in your lounge together. They're opposing feelings, and you've accommodated them both. And so things could get a bit awkward, but the conversation turns very interesting because excitement and fear have different stories to tell. And with both of them, you arrive at a more plausible truth than if only one of them had appeared. And this is a personification of what actually goes on with your emotions, because I've spoken about accommodation. We've accommodated both of these feelings and we've accepted both of them. And if you can do that, you can accept that you can hold more than one feeling at the same time. You can hold a feeling of excitement and a fear of absolute dread together, for example. And um, I'm not a psychologist, but I have read up a bit about DBT, which is dialectical behavioral dialectical behavioral therapy. Okay, so the usual therapy was cognitive behavioral therapy. However, it doesn't work on all patients, and this type of therapy was made particularly for borderline personalities and personalities which hold opposing viewpoints and do not think like a so-called normal neurotypical human being. Okay, so um, DBT involves a lot, including mindfulness, and its aim is to actually improve upon a situation through change. And there's no way that we're going to change unless we accept all our emotions. So, besides acceptance and accommodation, we're going to also have to apply validation. And often there are only certain emotions or feelings or behaviors or actions that are acceptable. And in certain scenarios, we need to, or we feel the need to pretend that we have the acceptable emotions. Like, for example, you go to a baby shower and you're supposed to be happy for the person who's having the baby and all that, but maybe you've got some trauma in your background and you might have lost a baby, but you don't want to tell anyone about that, or be a damper on the occasion, and therefore you don't validate your own emotions. You would rather let into uh, your psyche, or try and let into your psyche some fake happiness, which is not really happiness, and that might really be the worst visitor that you can accommodate in your guest house. If we're looking at that as a guest house, because you really need to come to terms with your own emotions. It doesn't mean to say you need to sit miserable all day, but you need to eventually, or maybe after the event, really sit down with yourself and think, why did I feel that way? And accommodate those emotions that were rather uncomfortable, that you could not express, of course, in front of the people at the happy event. So that's validation, number 3. Expression. Okay, so expression is the next one, number 4. And okay, so how are you going to express the emotion? You stuff down all the emotions, or you shut them out of your guest house if you want your guest house to look perfect. Let's say you are holding the baby shower in your guest house, for example. Okay, you don't want people there who are all miserable and putting a damper on the occasion, so you will maybe throw them out the door if they behave badly, because it could be that they start weeping, or they start crying, or they start playing up, or they anything like that. Now I'm really saying something to the extreme, but it could happen that you chase people out, if they're not acting in the required behavioral way to act. Okay. So, but let's say you are the person that did actually get chucked out of a place because of your negativity. They say, oh, you're so negative. We don't want to be with you. Please leave if you're going to be negative, because they don't really understand the deeper emotions within. So how are you going to express yourself afterwards? Well, maybe you decide to walk home instead of drive home, or get a lift home, or get an Uber home, or however you got there. So walking in itself is letting out some energy. Perhaps you go back to your house, you take out your journal, and you just write out your emotions. And that might not be even enough. So you need to ascertain, is there someone I can speak to? Must I go for therapy for this? Do I need to find a therapist who will understand, so that I can get the proper validation for my feelings and be able to express them? Or is there another way that I can do this? You might also decide, or eventually find that creativity helps, because there are many memoirs written these days. People realize the therapeutic effect if they are people who have the time and the patience to write, and probably even the skill or the gift to write, or else to speak. In other words, if they are a public speaker and they want to talk about their experience, there are many channels that you can actually use to directly express your feelings. Otherwise, there are ways that you can use to maybe indirectly express them, such as in art. You could become a brilliant artist, like Vincent van Gogh. He was not really the happiest person, but yet he produced the most beautiful art. And that was through creativity. So he used the strategy of creativity to actually probably make his life very happier, because I'm sure he got lots of satisfaction from the art that he produced. And so did the rest of the world. So he channeled it into something which benefited a lot of people. And you can do that in music as well. I was thinking of the different types of music that I like to experiment with, and I'm not really a fan of rap, but in a way, I've learned to appreciate where it comes from and how people are expressing themselves in that way. And I really do get it now that people would do create that type of music, even though it's not the type of music I prefer to listen to. I prefer to listen to maybe, oh, I don't know, variety, as you know, if you've watched my shorts. But the thing is, I like something more cheerful and something that's rather deep because it reflects the person that I am. It brings out the emotions and makes me feel happy. For example, I like Tchaikovsky and I like Mozart and I like certain pop tunes which are meaningful and tuneful, but I don't like the ones that have no tune, really. Um, but that's me. I'm talking about myself now. But you may be different. You may um, music is really a way to do it, but it's also a way to maybe some of the music brings in that depression and that fear and that sadness. And in which case, maybe you need to change the music that you're listening to if it's too sad, because some people just wallow in it. But then, on the other hand, there are people that can, they have the capacity to wallow in it and actually makes them feel happier. And I'm thinking about a particular personality type here, which is namely like an INFP, which are the introverted people that really have feeling and are okay expressing their own selves quite adequately without worrying about what other people are thinking of their music choices or their clothing choices or their anything. So it depends on your personality how you're going to express it and create things. And there are many forms of creation as well. It could be dance, it could even be sport, it could be um, last night we went to an event where there was a playwright and she's said to be a brilliant playwright. And I thought, wow, I was so, I admired her a lot to be able to be a playwright. But some people can channel their gifts towards that. And all creativity is a form of emotional expression, whether it be happy or sad or wanting to teach the world something in your particular art form. Okay, so that's creativity. And then the other thing is also when we go back to the guest house where you are the what do they call it? The one the lady of the house, okay, who's letting in the guests, the manageress, the owner, whatever you are. Okay, so um, and then you realize that some of the guests there have overstayed their welcome and that you're actually getting tired of them and they really are putting a damper on everything around there. You can't function your guest house properly because these people are always sitting around and really, I mean, one of them is really sitting in the corner, looking green all day and just sort of doing nothing but complain and talk about other people and gossip. And okay, so this is when you can think, these things are so negative. Why are these people sitting around here? I want to chase them out. I want to evict them. So your next step is eviction because um, to be specific, those are probably called guilt, shame, grief, and they have become so chronic that they turned into something else. Envy. Probably the green one was called envy. And uh, and grief. Grief is it's a valid emotion, but I mean it's more than an emotion actually. But it's something that we need to learn to deal with in the best way. And so when you evict those people, some of them need to be gently evicted and taken along the right path outside, see the right, see go to the right counselor. Like I'm reading a book called On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. People that understand them. So they really need to go there. They don't need to be sitting in a guest house uh, infecting everyone else with their sad energy or the ones with the shame. They need to get to the bottom of that, have the courage to get to the bottom of that. And they need to leave the place, which is the guest house, which is your mind. They need to leave that so that the nicer ones can come in. Not necessarily huge excitement, but maybe joy, because joy will be longer lasting than excitement. So next time you have a knock on the door, it might well be joy if you've evicted the tenants that you no longer want to have there, because they can well outstay their welcome. And you don't need to be polite enough to accommodate them if they're infecting everyone else. And then when dealing with emotions as well, it's important to remember what Viktor Frankl says about emotions. And that is to leave a space in between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, as probably most of you know, he was a psychiatrist who was in the Holocaust. Now imagine being in a concentration camp and not knowing if you would even survive it and having really no hope or dreams for the future because you didn't know if you would ever get out of there. So, but he said between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, you find your freedom. So, the last point is to make a space, and that's your final strategy, and probably the most important strategy, because if you make a space when you can see that stimulus in the first place, you can make a space between that and the response, and you can choose how to respond. But there's not always time for a space, but you just need to be aware that you need to get better at it. Even if it's like a minute or 5 minutes pause, if someone says something really nasty to you, would you slip into self-defeat and agree with them, or would you immediately lash out at them in anger? It can be a difficult one, but if you're aware that you need to make that space and you need to work within that space, you can prevent a lot of these unwelcome visitors in your guest house, which is your mind. Okay, so and then I also have appreciated the work of Carl Rogers, because he says that if you accept yourself, you can change. You need to accept yourself before you can change. Only when you can accept yourself, you can change. Okay, I'm paraphrasing him now, but this is the thing, to accept yourself, you need to accept all your emotions, all of them, the so-called good ones, the so-called bad ones, and you don't need to label any of them. Just have them take a seat together, converse, combine. DBT also involves mindfulness. Um, it's there are a lot of techniques there. Okay, I'm not going to go into them. You rather check out with a psychologist about that. But yes, it does involve thinking about things and letting go of a lot of stuff and being in the present as well, because that's why the cognitive behavioral therapy only works to a certain extent, but beyond that you do need to live in the present and accept the past as well. So those are I've done 7 strategies for self-regulation, which for me was a difficult one, because really, throughout my life I've had to self-regulate myself a lot. So yeah. Okay, let me just summarize all that. So first of all, I said what you need are accommodation, number 1, acceptance, number 2, validation, number 3, expression, number 4, creativity, number 5, eviction, number 6, and leave a space. That's number 7. So that's the EQ star part 2. And those are 7 strategies for self-regulation, which is the second step after self-awareness out of the 5 steps in the EQ Star program. And thanks so much for getting this far and for watching and for listening, and I'll chat to you next time. Bye-bye.